Welcome to Bunny Trails, a whimsical adventure of idioms and other turns of phrase. I'm Shauna Harrison.
And I'm Dan Pugh. Each week, we take an idiom or other turn of phrase and try to tell the story from its entry into the English language to how it's used today. When I was in college, I did a business degree, and much of that degree was focused on understanding a little bit about a lot of things in business. The point wasn't that I had to do everything. The point was I needed to build a team that could do everything. And so when my professor asked me what I was least comfortable with, I said finance. And he told me that I didn't need to be a finance expert. I needed to hire a finance expert. But what I needed more than that was just enough knowledge to make sure my finance person wasn't cooking the books. And according to the Oxford English Dictionary, to cook the books means, quote, to fraudulently alter account books or other financial records. Later, in extended use, to alter any factual evidence in order to deceive or to suit a particular purpose, end quote.
Yeah, all right.
I really like this phrase because when we came into it, I was very unsure of where the origins of this would be. I had a pretty good feeling about the word books. I knew, the shorthand of that, and I had felt pretty good about that. But I was not sure how cooking, how to cook those books came into play. So this was a really fascinating episode for me to research here. And both words in this phrase, cook and book, have meaning that gets added to the phrase. Sometimes you'll have a word that gets thrown into a phrase that that's not really the subject and it's just there. But in this case, both of these do have meaning. So a cook is a person who prepares food. And that term has been in the language since Old English. And this is actually, when we talk about cook, we are talking about a noun, not a verb. That is how this word originated.
Okay.
It wasn't until Middle English when cook took on a verb, as in the act of preparing food, usually with heat. So this is where we went from the noun in Old English, and then in Middle English it took on the verb. So now we have the act of preparing food being to cook, right? And it was in the 1500s that cook took on a figurative meaning, which meant to prepare or develop something, even outside the food context. Here's an example from the Portraiture of the Prodigal Son by Samuel Gardner, and this is from the late 1500s. Quote, "The truth of God's word is full of suck and sap. It is meat that may be relished without curious cooking it." End quote. So in this case, it's a figurative preparation outside of the food cooking. So he's using it here in this example because it's metaphorical and it fits the rest of the metaphor. But, so it is that figurative context. And then in the early 1600s, to cook something also took on the inverse or a negative tone, meaning to do something dishonest. So to prepare it, but in a dishonest way, to tamper with something. Like in this example from John Sargent's 1655 work, Schisms Disarmed of the Defensive Weapons. Quote, "All the substantial part being already confuted 100 times over, and only the cooking it up changed." End quote. So it's easy to see how we went from a person who prepares food being a cook, to that work meaning the preparation of food, to it meaning the preparation of anything, to the negative connotation with preparing something that would be deceitful. And that is how the word cook is being used in the phrase cook the books. And that I did not know about cook. I just assumed that cooking something as the verb was the origin of it. But no, it originated as the noun, the person doing it, and then from Old English. And then it wasn't until Middle English that we verbified it.
Yeah, I think that's really is very interesting that word did go in that like kind of reverse, because a lot of times titles for people, their job titles or their names came from the thing that they did.
Right.
So,
yeah. Exactly. He's a Cooper because he does that stuff. I mean, like they're
Coopered.
Yeah, Coopered. Maybe that was a bad example.
Yeah, it's hilarious.
All right. Well, books since the early 1400s has been a term used to describe, quote, a systematic record of commercial transactions, minutes of meetings, attendance, etc. Also, a volume containing such records, an account book, a ledger, or in later use, its electronic equivalent, and it is frequently used in the plural, end quote. So in our phrase, the book in question is a book of accounts, a volume containing commercial transactions and other records. And hence, to create false or adjusted entries into an accounting book is to cook the books. So that part is pretty easy. That makes sense, and that's how obviously book has been used in many other ways, but it has been used in this way since the 1400s, meaning like a book of accounts or something.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah. So now, before we jump into the phrase cook the books, I do want to say we are not really going to discuss the ways in which one might actually commit this act, at least not in the main show. However, we will talk about the top 10 ways in which one might cook the books in our behind the scenes episode, and those air every Friday on our Patreon, patreon.com/bunnytrailspod. We will start Cook the Books with one of the earliest uses of our phrase I could find. And this one is from the January 21st, 1850 edition of the Globe and Traveller out of London, England. It references an extradition request by the English government to the United States government of one Henry Stratton, who is accused of committing accounting fraud and then fleeing to the U.S. with his family. Here is the last paragraph of the article, which contains our phrase, quote, "The mode which Stratton adopted to mystify the accounts and to cook the books of the bank, to deceive the trustees and managers, as well as Mr. James, the secretary, was out of a character to disarm suspicion, and was only to be discovered by the closest investigation and the strictest scrutiny." End quote. I find it interesting here that cook is in little quotes. It has its own little single quotes here, meaning to cook the books of the bank. So the books of the bank was absolutely proper terminology, right? The books of the bank. That was nothing. But in this case, we're saying he's doing something to cook those books, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's almost as if the phrase is being used here, but it's not even thinking of it as cook the books as a phrase. Just they're using cook in the way that we have seen cook be used in that deceitful creation or deceitful preparation, and just being used to talk about the books of the bank.
Right.
But it definitely, I see after this, the floodgates are open. So I'm not making the claim that this story, although this would have been a really common and popular story around England of the time. So I'm not making the claim that this kicked this off, but it is quite possible that this use of the word cook here was because it was becoming a more accepted, even though it's a slang term, more accepted in newspapers and other places to use that as a terminology.
Gotcha.
So here's another one from shortly thereafter, and it comes from the Saturday Review out of London, England, and is dated July 13th, 1861. In it, the author is speaking on potential bias in the roles, and the phrase comes up as if everyone has always known the phrase. Quote, "It is quite reasonable for a Church of England debtor to object to his accounts in bankruptcy being prepared by a Baptist official assignee. It is no more than fair for a dissenting grocer to say that the parson of the parish is not a safe savings bank manager because he may be tempted by his zeal for religion to cook the books of all the Wesleyan depositors in the district." End quote.
Interesting.
Yeah. Now obviously there's been historical pieces where religious wars have been a big thing, and I know Ireland and the UK have had their share of that, as has the US and other places. So I'm not sure if this was in a almost satirical usage, but I didn't get that feeling from reading the article. It's difficult to understand satire from 200 years ago, but
Mm-hmm.
I get the impression that this is a real concern for the author. Not to say that it's a real concern for real at the time, but I get the impression the author felt like this was really a concern, that someone may cook the books in favor of others that are part of their group.
See, so he's like, don't give the temptation.
Yes, that's exactly it.
Okay.
And hence he's speaking on the potential bias. There is a chance, like I said, that could be satire, though. And if that's the case, well done as well. It works too. Here's a good example from the Detroit Free Press, as published on January 12, 1893, in the Barton County Democrat out of Kansas, USA. Quote, The Republican papers have always made, or attempted to make, a great deal of capital of the fact that the books of the government balanced 8 years ago into the insignificant sum of 2 cents. But that only showed that the GOP was so sure of continuing in power that it made no effort to hide its grabs by cooking the books. It's quite possible that the books of the pension department were balanced to a dot, but that will not change the fact that the government has been robbed of millions in that department. End quote.
Mm.
So I did not look up whatever potential scandal was being mentioned here because honestly, the politics in the United States are still as vitriolic now as they ever were, and I just can't engage with it on any sort of a regular basis. But suffice it to say, the party not in power in 1893 is accusing the party in power of cooking the books to balance the budget, and I have no idea if it was true or not, but these last two examples are just really good good highlights for why we commonly say that in friendly company it's not a good idea to talk about politics or religion.
Yeah, generally.
because both of these are relatively one-sided on from the author's point of view.
Mm-hmm.
We'll move into the 1900s with this one, and this one has quite the title. I'm going to include it not only because of the phrase, but also because the title is evocative. So this is from the Washington Herald out of Washington, D.C., USA, and it is dated August 23rd, 1920. Our phrase is used in an article titled, "Yank who made ice cream in Paris fights with partner and knocks out 15 employees who attacked him."
Oh.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it seems Jed and his business partner Fitch had a disagreement about the profit sheets at their ice cream factory in Paris, France. Fitch brought 15 employees that were loyal to him to attack Jed with clubs. And when the dust settled, apparently a bruised and battered Jed was the only man still standing. And then he was promptly arrested. We'll pick up the story from the article. Quote, "At the station house, he proved he was the one attacked and now has filed suit against his erstwhile partner, charging him with cooking the books, which, being translated, means converting profits into seeming losses." End quote.
Like, wow.
Yeah, it's clear that this article in some way most incredulous about the news because it goes on to mention that Parisians are still being disappointed in the lack of ice cream available to them while this all gets sorted out because they've closed that factory. And apparently it was a pretty large ice cream factory. And so Parisians were having an ice cream shortage here, which also did seem to be a bigger part of the story. But
yeah, because everybody's like, why don't we have ice cream? And
but
they're
we
like,
need ice
wait
cream,
a minute,
though.
let me tell you all the tea.
And in fairness, I know that summer can be very hot everywhere in the northern hemisphere, and Paris was probably no different August of 1920.
Right.
Okay, this next one was published in The Economist out of London, England, and is dated April 6th, 1946. It's referencing the accounting practices of the Coal Board. Quote, "The accounts are to be in such a form as the minister may direct, and the opposition, with varying degrees of tact and expertise, attempted to show that this was placing too much power in the hands of the minister and exposing him to the temptation of cooking the books for political purposes." End quote. So this is much like what you had just commented on with the religious example that we used from the 1860s, where there was a concern that someone could cook the books for, their own gains or the gains of their particular in-crowd, their group of people, right? And that's exactly what the folks were arguing here. The opposition was arguing, though I love the dripping connotations within the phrase with varying degrees of tact and expertise.
Yeah, that's amazing.
That is almost
awesome.
as good for me as them commenting that the temptation of cooking the books for political purposes.
Yes, yeah.
We're going to wrap up this segment with the most exciting of things, part of a political speech from August 7th, 1958, during debate on the second reading of an appropriations bill. That's so exciting, right?
Yeah.
This is from the Parliament of Ceylon, which is now Sri Lanka, and this excerpt is by Peter Kuhneman. Quote, "Good bookkeeping should at least bring out the true state of affairs of the institution whose books have been kept. The Minister of Finance does not do this. He is either blissfully ignorant of the meaning of the figures which stick out under his nose, or else he is trying to fudge the accounts and cook the books." End quote. So in the background here is that they are concerned because the Minister of Finance continues to say that their economy is thriving despite what many people believe to be the evidence to the contrary through gestures broadly. So
Hmm.
like it was almost like they're holding as self-evident that this is not in a good economic state, even though the Minister of Finance is continuing to say that, which is why he says he's either blissfully ignorant or he's trying to fudge the accounts and cook the books.
Hmm.
And in addition to the insinuation of cooking the books, he also drops another term I really like, and that's the word fudge to mean lie or deceive. And interestingly, I had to go look this up. It led me down a good 30 or 45-minute bunny trail. But fudge, meaning to lie or deceive, was actually the primary meaning of the word for over a century before we started using it to describe a type of dessert.
Wow.
Yeah, I was like, what? This
Huh.
is amazing. I had no idea.
I could see that though, I guess, because, yeah, other words that rhyme with, which that doesn't necessarily make sense, but I don't know. I'm thinking of other words that are similar, like smudge or I don't know, whatever, budge. Like
Sure.
none of the words that end with udge are really like desserts.
Right. No, yeah. Yeah, sludge, smudge. Yeah, that's a great point. Now that you say that. Yeah. Ew. Yeah. Ugh. Gross. I don't want to think about that anymore. I like my desserts. All right. Well, with that, it's time to move to our more modern usage. But first, we need to say thank you to our sponsors.
This episode is sponsored by our amazing patrons on Patreon. And the cool thing about Patreon is it is 100% free to join the community. We have new things every weekday on the feeds. On Mondays, we have a conversation about what movies, shows, books, podcasts, and whatever else everyone is enjoying. Tuesdays see early access to the week's podcast. Wednesdays have all the links, books, songs, and other content mentioned in the week's episode. Thursday has patrons-only polls, and Fridays are our lightly edited behind-the-scenes video featuring all the cut content, goofs, and bonus facts you could imagine.
We've got some other pretty cool stuff too, like original digital artwork once a month made by Shauna, and direct access to talk with us. No algorithms getting in the way of what we see or don't see. Plus, you can get awesome name recognition like Pat Rowe does every episode. And our top spot is currently occupied by the amazing Mary Halsig Lopez. You can join the Bunny Trails community for free at Bunny Trails Pod on Patreon.
That's patreon.com/bunnytrailspod.
Well, as we start our modern uses, I do want to mention that there are many variants for cooking the books, and the phrase isn't used as much anymore as it once was. The more popular terms are financial engineering or creative accounting. And we'll link to the Google Ngram on the terms so you can see the change over time yourself if that interests you. A few other terms I've heard include massaging the balance sheet, creative bookkeeping, and accounting wizardry, which I love that one too. But despite other phrases taking the spotlight for accounting shenanigans, there are still several ways we see the phrase in popular culture today. And we're going to start with Cook the Books, which was a British new wave band that formed in 1980 from two other bands, Dodgems and Brooklyn. They found success throughout Europe during their lifetime together. Perhaps their biggest hit came from the song Your Eyes off the soundtrack for the French film La Baume 2, starring Sophie Marceau. And while they never found commercial success in the US or the UK, they did find a fan base in much of the rest of Europe, especially in France, thanks to the success of the movie. They were also popular in Hong Kong and the Philippines. We'll link to a YouTube video for the song Your Eyes, as well as a web archive link of their unofficial fan page in the show notes, which is available on our Patreon or at bunnytrailspod.com. Cooking the Books, A Recipe for Murder, is a 2007 short film by Jacqueline Hankins. It was written for the musical film series Hip Hop Musical Mysteries and is a Wall Street spoof. A spoof means you're making fun of something, but usually in a good-natured way. So this short film is joking about Wall Street, the proverbial financial center of the United States. Here is the synopsis from the trailer, quote, "Indicted by the feds for stock fraud and embezzlement, Harold Johnson and associates would rather murder than go to jail," end quote. This looks kooky and silly, and I would absolutely watch it if I could find it. I'm linking to the trailer, and that was enough to get me like, I do want to watch this. I don't know how long it is, but I do want to watch it. So because it just looks like the kind of like, as long as you know it's a spoof going into it, then I'm just like, heck yeah, I
Right.
want this. I want to watch this.
Yeah, I find spoof movies to be really entertaining, and like sometimes they have like a decent, undercurrent of social commentary that's intriguing, but
Right.
a lot of times because it's a spoof, so it's like not even taking that too seriously. So it's like
Hmm.
it'll be like kind of hitting at it, but not really like pushing things, and so that's
Right.
really fun.
Yeah, I think sometimes the line between spoof and satire is how seriously it takes itself while it's doing it, you
Yeah.
know? And I love satire, I love spoofs, I love like the really ridiculous spoofs like the Naked Gun series, or
Mm-hmm.
that kind of stuff, but I also really love satire, like a lot of Terry Pratchett's work kind of thing, Kurt
Right.
Vonnegut's work. Those are
Mm-hmm.
really good satire that don't take themselves too seriously, but there's enough seriousness there that if you weren't versed on the issues, you might think that they're just being serious.
Right. Well, and I think what I enjoy most about those films is that they don't treat the audience like they are stupid.
Yes,
Like
exactly.
they just assume you know what they're making a joke about, and I appreciate that. It's fun.
Yep. Okay, so Cook the Books was a 2014 TV show that ran for one season. You can find it on Tubi, and here's the synopsis from there. Quote, hosted by broadcaster, foodie, and cookbook fan Carly Flynn, this series celebrates cookbooks, food authors, and celebrity chefs. End quote.
Okay.
I'm not really into like all of the celebrity cooking stuff, so that doesn't necessarily appeal to me. But there some of the works that I've seen around Cook the Books. A lot of them are about not about the cooking itself, but about the world around it,
Mm.
and so those types of things, I think I could probably like. I would check out an episode of this and see what it looked like, because it's celebrating like cookbooks and the authors and the celebrity chefs, but it's not the cooking show itself, which
Right.
I'm not really into like the Master Chefs or the Great British Bake Off or whatever. Don't send me hate mail, please. It's just not my thing. I think they're great for people. They're not my thing.
Yeah, sometimes they just depress me. I'm like watching it. I'm like, oh man, I just can't do all this. This is so much. Like I feel like I'm doing so much work. Like,
Yeah, they're being really mean to that person, and
yeah,
I'm just like, I can't even do that. Wow.
yeah.
Ooh. Well, Cook the Books is a 2015 book by Jessica Connett Park and Susan Connett. It's the fifth book in the Gourmet Girl Mysteries series. Here's the synopsis from the publisher. Quote, Gourmet girl Chloe Carter is keeping busy with grad school and spoiling her best friend's 3-month-old son. Now, courtesy of Craigslist, she has a new job as an assistant to cookbook author Kyle Boucher, a job that stirs up painful memories of her ex-boyfriend Josh, who chose the shimmering beaches of Hawaii over a life with her on the mean streets of Boston. The gig heats up when Boucher asks her to compile a book of recipes from Boston's top chefs. Chloe leaps from the frying pan into the fire when she arrives for a meeting with Digger, one of Josh's friends and a rival chef, and discovers a dead body inside. Digger died of smoke inhalation from a blaze that started in his kitchen. Unable to believe that an executive chef would allow a grease fire to get so out of control, Chloe starts an unofficial search for the murderer. As if she didn't have enough on her plate already, now Josh is back in town. Chloe must decide where her future truly lies, but as a killer prepares to strike again, the amateur detective will find herself racing against time to protect those nearest and dearest to her. End quote.
Okay.
Yeah, I feel like this synopsis is setting up a potential reconnection with Josh, just because it said he chose the shimmering beaches of Hawaii over life with her on the mean streets of Boston.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
you're laying it
It's
out
getting it
pretty thick
ready.
there.
And I'm like, did he choose the light? What was the choice there? Did he leave her, or did he be like, let's go to Hawaii? And she was like, no.
Right? Yeah.
Like,
I don't know. Well, Cooking the Books is a weekly column written by Doreen Sheridan for CriminalElement.com. In it, Ms. Sheridan reviews a book and cooks a recipe that was used in the book. There are thousands of these reviews because she started the project in 2016 and is still going at the time of this recording, which is amazing.
yeah.
Yeah. Cooking the Books with Jilly Smith is a podcast that started in 2020 and still runs as the time of this recording. In the podcast, food is the story. Here's the synopsis from the About Me section of the Acast show page. Quote, "It's about all life, from climate change to culture to politics to people through the prism of food. It's for foodie book lovers who want to hear something more profound about the way we live, making the link between delicious food and the impact of food production on the land through books. Hear how A-lister food writers have changed the conversation about food as Jilly talks through their 4 chosen food moments from their latest books. As she joins the dots between stories from the old country and food identity, plant-based recipes, and climate change, she shows how a deeper connection with food really could save the planet." End quote.
Wow.
This is another one where I feel like I'm not really into some of those cooking things, but this one I think really has a depth to it that takes an angle that I would really appreciate that angle, you know?
Yeah.
Well, one more here. Cooking the Books is a YouTube channel with about 68,000 subscribers and over 7 million views across 300-ish videos. The oldest video on the channel is from 2021, and they're still putting out videos as of the time of this recording. Here's the description from Anna, the host. Quote, "I've collected vintage cookbooks for many years, and I love trying out new, to me, vintage recipes. If you love food, cookbooks, and all things vintage, then you've come to the right place." End quote. Some of these titles are 1960s Dinner for Two, 1940s Budget Dinners, and 1960s Casseroles. So if that seems like your thing, you should check out her work. She really is good at explaining things so that everyone understands while not sounding like she's talking down to anyone. I actually watched the 1960s Dinner for Two one and the 1940s Budget Dinners. And I appreciated with the 1940s that she talked about, this is what they used here. Dried beef, for example. She said, this is what they used back then, but this is a budget meal, and dried beef now costs like $8 for what she needed for that recipe. She's like, I'm not going to spend $8 on a budget meal. That's more than the
Right.
whole meal would cost. So she, shows you how to find some budget things from today that would be the same, right? But they're not the exact same thing, but they are stand-ins. Like, this is what the budget would be now to do that in its budget way. So
Right.
I felt like she really did a good job of explaining things and showed like, this is what they would have used in that time frame, but it is no longer the cheap thing that it once was,
Yeah.
And so it's kind of, I really thought she did a good job with that.
I think that is kind of cool because it's like okay, this was a budget meal then. It doesn't make it a budget item now.
Right.
So, yeah, interesting.
Well, I really enjoy doing shows where the phrase has a clear pathway from its entry into the English language to how it's used today. This one has that clear pathway from a person called a cook in Old English to cooking as a verb in Middle English to a figurative usage, then to the negative of that figurative. And in the 1800s, it met up with books, short for books of account, to bring us this fun phrase. And even though it's being usurped by some other less obvious phrases, I still find cooking the books to be my favorite term for fraud that happens with business financials. Assuming I'm allowed to have favorite ways to describe crime. I'm not committing them, mind you, so I think that's okay. This is getting off the rails, which is another good phrase that maybe we'll do in the future. But anyway, that's about all we have for today. If you have any thoughts on the show or pop culture references we should have included, reach out to us on Patreon. That's patreon.com/bunnytrailspod, or comment on our website, bunnytrailspod.com.
It's poll time. Recently, we asked our patrons, when thinking of shoes, what kind of fastener do you prefer? With almost 80% of the vote, slip-ons won the day. Mary is clearly on team slip-on. Quote, "I now wear Hey Dudes all the time. I only wear other shoes if I have to, and my feet wonder why." End quote. Jan comes in with another viewpoint. Quote, "Laces. I put too much effort into learning how to tie them to abandon it now." End quote.
That's fair.
Yeah.
When I wear shoes, I'm in Camp Slip-On. My favorite pair of shoes are Noe Mesh shoes by Olokai, and I have 2 pairs, and they're my primary non-dressed up shoe. And when I need to dress nice, I wear a pair of Helsinki loafers by Echo, and all of those are slip-on. But I do have to agree with Jan in some areas, though. My running shoes and my hiking boots both have laces, and that is probably for the best in my case.
I prefer no shoes at all.
I didn't feel like that was an option.
Okay, I went with slip-ons.
I also prefer no shoes at all. I rarely wear shoes inside the house. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I
all
just
right,
like
that's fair.
sometimes I'm like they're shoes, so I mean if I have to wear shoes,
All right, so you went with slip-ons.
yeah. I don't mind laces on like running shoes or hiking boots. I have Velcro on my hiking sandals. They're by Zero and they're amazing.
I have seen your hiking sandals, if that's a thing. That's what they're called. I have no, I don't know where you're hiking that those would be great, but sure,
They're
yeah,
perfect for like if you're in an area where there's a lot of like terrain that you don't want to walk on, but there also is like streams or things like that, then you can walk through the water, like you're
mm,
on the rocks, on the sand, like whatever, like lots of different things without having problems. Yeah.
fair
So,
enough.
as a reminder, our silly polls mean absolutely nothing and are not scientifically valid, and patrons of all levels, including our free tiers, can take part. Head over to patreon.com/bunnytrailspod to take this week's poll. Thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you again next week. And until then, remember,
Words belong to their users.
users.